evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts. Welcome to the October 22nd edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, accountable to you. The show that reminds you a simple lesson. If you wish your government here in Winstead to change the way it does the people's business, then we the people are going to have to change the government here in Winstead. I want to talk about a number of different things this evening. Starting off with where we talked last week about the candidates for the Board of Education. We'll talk a little bit about yesterday's Board of Selectmen meeting and some of the highlights of that, and then go on into the candidates for the Board of Selectmen. Firstly, the Board of Education debate last week. Last week we reviewed what we wanted to hear from the candidates from the Board of Education. We wanted to hear those candidates commit to having the schools work with the community and not against it. We wanted to hear those candidates commit to rebuilding the credibility of our schools and our Board of Education. We wanted to hear those candidates commit to upgrading the results of our teaching and education. We wanted those candidates to commit to living with the people's budget. And we wanted those candidates to commit to working with Gilbert and not against Gilbert, to partnering with Gilbert and all of the positive changes that Gilbert is making and not seeking to undermine Gilbert. But most of all, we said we wanted the opportunity to listen to the candidates, all of the candidates, and to figure out whether we actually believed them, whether we actually trusted them. So what happened, ladies and gentlemen? Well, the Republican candidates attended, and they said pretty much what you would expect a candidate for the Board of Education, to say. They said we need to see better results from our schooling. We need a commitment to a better educational system. They said we need to see less waste in our school system. We need to ensure that money is spent wisely. And they said that we need our schools to play nicely in the sandbox of the community. We need to work with the community and not against the community. Three very simple, common sense messages, hard to argue that any of those messages are inappropriate or not something to vote for. That's what we heard from the Republican candidates. The Democratic candidates, Royer, Shaughnessy, Melcher, the Democratic candidates didn't show up. Not a single one of them. No phone call, no message. They just didn't show up. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, candidates for a Board of Education giving the finger to their own students, the students who had prepared for weeks for this debate, and they just didn't show up. Perhaps it's because they weren't ready to commit to the things that we said we wanted to hear. Perhaps they were just a teeny bit embarrassed about the fact that their boss, Candy Perez, has been planning for the last 6 months to close not just one of the schools, as the Republicans would have us do, but all of them, and Gilbert, and Region 7, and half the other schools in the state. Perhaps they're just a wee bit embarrassed about Candy Perez and her plan to close the schools. The incumbents, Doc Dutton, Chris Royer, Brian Shaughnessy. Doc Dutton was the only one to show up. We thank him for showing up. He left us with a distinct impression that he felt that the issues surrounding the Board of Education were far too complex for the meager understanding of the voters of this town. We should simply vote for the incumbents on the basis of their track record. Now, setting aside the notion that telling the voters that they're too stupid to understand the issues is an unusual and unorthodox way of running a campaign for office, this approach might go so far, or go some way, I should say, to explaining one of the great conundrums of the schools here in Winchester. If the Board of Education is incapable of explaining to the people of this town what the issues are with our schools, should we be surprised that our schools are just as incapable of explaining to our students how to read, write, and add up? Let's just take Doc Dutton at his word for a minute. Let us assume that we are indeed too stupid to understand the issues. And let's just look at the record. What has been the record of the incumbents on the Board of Education? Let's look at them against those three categories. We want a better educational outcome. We want more wise spending, less waste. And we want for the Board of Education to work well with the town, to work well with the community and not against it. The Board of Education has done a stellar job, ladies and gentlemen, of working hand in glove with the political leaders of the Democratic-led Board of Selectmen. When Candy Perez underfunded the MBR last year, the Board of Selectmen, nevertheless, the Board of Education had the superintendent certify that the MBR had been met. Same thing the following year. When Candy Perez presented a cash flow plan that would close all of the schools here in town, the Board of Education voted not to go to the state and asked for state assistance in getting Candy Perez to open up the purse. The Board of Education has done an excellent job of playing well with Candy Perez whilst betraying the interests of the community of Winsted. The Board of Education has not taken steps to eliminate waste. We have added to our spending. We have added to our administration. We have agreed to more contracts with benefit plans that the rest of us saw disappear decades ago. We have failed to close an empty school. And even today continue to argue that operating 3 schools is somehow cheaper and more efficient than 2. And have we succeeded somehow in improving the educational outcome for our children? Have we improved our test scores? We are an Alliance district, ladies and gentlemen. We are among the 30 bottom districts in the state. Certain of the Alliance districts were singled out this year as having made dramatic strides forward. Winchester was not among them. We had some minor improvements in some areas. We had deterioration in others. Frankly, the areas of biggest movement in our test scores was downward and not upward. The one area we have seen progress educationally is actually with Gilbert. Gilbert has a long way to go. Whether they will get there is an open question. But Gilbert has made a very clear public commitment to improving its educational outcomes and has already seen dramatic improvements in its test scores and has been offered a number of awards and recognitions statewide as a result. So this is the record that the incumbents are running on. They protected Candy but betrayed the community. They spent more money on non-educational things, less money on teaching. And the test scores, other than the Gilbert test scores, have not shown much in the way of improvement. And yet, ironically, Doc Dutton finds that Gilbert, the one area, the one bright spot here on the record, as being the one part of the incumbent's record that he would like to distance himself from. Doc Dutton believes he can't work with Gilbert. Doc Dutton believes the Winchester schools cannot work with Gilbert. Doc Dutton believes we should be sending our children elsewhere. Torrington. Who should you avoid on the Board of Education, ladies and gentlemen? The incumbents. Their record speaks for itself. Dutton, Roy, O'Shaughnessy. Who should you avoid for the Board of Education? The Democrats. Again, Roy, O'Shaughnessy, and Melcher. They didn't show up. It's difficult to know, difficult to listen to people who don't show up, difficult to believe people who don't show up, difficult to trust people who don't show up. Although it's all too understandable that they might be just a wee bit embarrassed about their record of protecting Candy Perez and her plan to close all of the schools. Before we get on to the candidates for the Board of Selectmen, I want to spend 2 minutes on last night's meeting. This was the last meeting of the Board of Selectmen before the election. We were informed that notwithstanding prior reports that showed our financial deficit was beginning to decline, those rosy reports were in large part due to mathematical errors and typos, and in fact our deficit continues to grow. With that disturbing information in hand, the Republican selectmen put a motion on the table to raise a $2 million supplemental tax to pay off our past due bills. No more avoiding the problem, no more GANs, no more gimmicks, no more accounting stuff, no more lies. Just raise a tax, pay the bills, get us back to an even playing field. That the Democrats voted no, that the Democrats killed this motion is perhaps not a surprise. What is surprising, what is perhaps shocking, is the Democrats refused to even discuss the motion. There was no talk of should the tax be higher or lower, or how should it work? No. It was a simple party line vote to kill a supplemental tax. Because the Democrats don't want to solve this problem, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrats don't want to acknowledge that there is a problem. The Democrats don't want to believe that we have to pay our bills. Now, what does this tell us about the Democrats? I think we can draw the conclusion from this that Candy Perez is politically astute. She's politically smart. She understands that voting for a supplemental tax right now, this close to the election, will imply that everything that she has said up to now has been a lie. It will imply that she somehow screwed up. Candy Perez is smart. And smarts is something we should appreciate in the selectmen. But I'm not sure that smarts that are employed exclusively for the protection of Candy Perez's political future, to the great detriment of the town, I'm not sure that those are the right smarts that we should be looking for in a candidate for the Board of Selectmen. George Clausen is not so smart. George Clausen is probably not smart enough to be a selectman, particularly in the current fiscal crisis. Mike Renzullo is smart too. Mike Renzullo has gotten pretty much everything he wanted. But the simple fact is that Mike Renzullo doesn't really care about a supplemental tax. Mike Renzullo doesn't pay taxes. He's already said the property he owns, he won't pay taxes on it until he sells it, if he ever sells it, when he sells it, perhaps if he sells it. Mike Renzullo doesn't pay taxes. Mike Renzullo doesn't care what happens with a supplemental tax. Mike Renzullo doesn't care about fixing the problem. The Democrats' true colors, ladies and gentlemen. Candy wants to protect Candy's reputation and political future. George Clausen can't figure out what the hell we're talking about. And Mike Renzullo simply wants to eat from the trough. He's not really interested in solving our problems. So let's move on to the Board of Selectmen debate. This coming Thursday, Gilbert School, 7 p.m. Who do we have debating on the Democrat side? Well, assuming they actually show up, which perhaps we shouldn't assume, there are a couple of new faces on the Democrat slate. Loretta Tremblay. I don't know much about Loretta Tremblay, ladies and gentlemen. I've heard she's affiliated or has been affiliated with MoveOn.org, which would not be my preferred training ground for a selectman. But frankly, I have never met Loretta Tremblay. I have never heard her speak. I have never seen her issues. As far as I'm concerned, she may be a perfectly wonderful candidate for the Board of Selectmen. Virginia Schultz-Charette, by contrast, we know quite a lot about. Despite the newspaper's unwillingness to talk about Virginia Schultz-Charette, despite the Register Citizen's attempts to purge their archives of references to Virginia Schultz-Charette, there are a few stories that remain. Let's read again from the Register Citizen, October 5th, 2004. Officers from the Winchester Police Department arrested Virginia Schultz-Charette, 53, of 78 Wetmore Avenue in connection with the incident. Her threat was, I guess what I have to do is get a rifle and go over to Pearson School and start shooting and shoot some people to get some attention. I don't know what happened back in October 2004. All I know is what the Register Citizen has reported about what happened. And what the Register Citizen has reported is that this particular candidate, at least in 2004, did not demonstrate the judgment, the coolness under stress, or the appropriateness of behavior that one would expect in a candidate for any elected position, much less for the Board of Selectmen at a time of an inordinate stress in our town when hard decisions will need to be made. We need selectmen who can communicate with each other and with you, the people. We need selectmen who will make hard decisions, who will prioritize effectively. Threatening to go get a rifle is not what we need in a Board of Selectmen candidate. Which leaves us the incumbents: Perez, Clausen, and Renzullo. What do the incumbent candidates for the Board of Selectmen on the Democratic slate stand for? What is their record? What have they achieved in the last 2 years? Well, surprisingly enough, they would have you believe that their most startling achievement, at least when gauged by the amount of time they spend talking about it, is their willingness to stand outside Town Hall, to hold open the door, and to escort the staff to their cars bearing all of the town's money. Yes, you would believe that the Democrats' proudest achievement is allowing the staff to run off with the taxpayers' dollars. I don't know why anyone thinks that a gross failure of oversight, a gross failure of controls, should qualify anyone for office. And yet that's what the Democrats keep talking about. That is the defining feature of their administration, in their words. But I think there are other ways to define what has gone on here in Winsted over the last 2 years. Each of the incumbents have the letter D after their name, and I think it's incumbent upon us to ask what that D stands for. I think the D stands for deficits, for deadbeats, for do-nothing, for deceit, and defiance. The D stands for deficits, ladies and gentlemen. That much is quite clear. In June 2012, Marianne Welcome closed out the year with a deficit of $1.2 million. $1.2 million in unpaid bills. She maintained then, and has maintained since, that was due entirely to the actions of our former finance director, Henry Centrella. That is not true. This $1.2 million deficit was due entirely to the decision by Candy and the mayor to allow the school board to spend $1.3 million more than you, the people, had included in your budget. They told the Board of Education to spend like drunken sailors and never raised a nickel to pay for it. They told the Board of Education to spend $1.3 million additional, and we ended up with a $1.2 million deficit. In 2013, they managed to double the deficit. That's right, Candy managed to double the deficit from $1.2 million to $2.4 million. Henry wasn't here. It wasn't Henry's fault. D stands for deficit. 2014, the current year, everyone acknowledges that we will have another deficit. As recently as 2 weeks ago, it was said that that deficit had been halved in size, back to $1.1 million. And then last night we heard, oops, no, there are some mathematical problems in that calculation. That number is actually maybe $1.5 million, and maybe things aren't really going that well, and maybe we are continuing to overspend in certain line items, and maybe water and sewer needs to be subsidized some more. The number's going to be probably 2 million, I would imagine, by the end of the year. The Democrats, the D stands for deficit. 3 years of deficit run up by Candy and Marianne. The D also stands for deadbeat, ladies and gentlemen. Candy told us she could run the town without a fund balance. She can't. Candy told us we could run the town with millions and millions of dollars in unpaid bills. We can't. Candy presented a cash flow package to the Board of Education that actually results mathematically in closing all of our schools. Our 3 public schools, the Gilbert School, and quite possibly a whole bunch of other schools statewide. This is not the unanticipated result of a strange budget. This is a core element of Candy's budget. Candy planned to be a deadbeat. She said it was okay. It was okay to be a deadbeat. It would work. No one would seek to punish us. Of course, she didn't tell us that part of being a deadbeat was going to be closing all of the schools. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, if you think running the school system, a $22 million budget with 2 million unpaid bills is difficult, imagine how hard it's going to be to run the town with just a $10 million budget with the same $2 million in unpaid bills. Because Candy's latest plan, her latest stroke of brilliance, is simply to move the deficit from the school side to the town side. Because at the school side, it's getting all sorts of unwelcome attention from the state. On the town side, she can hide it. D stands for deadbeat. D also stands for do nothing. The incumbents on this board had 5 votes, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrats had a supermajority. They could have done anything they wanted. So what have they accomplished? We dug up Main Street. It's unclear whether we'll ever put it back together again. We tried to build an outhouse on the playing fields. We can't even do that without screwing it up. Capital Products is still the same old Capital Products that it was 2 years ago before we gave it away to Mike Renzillo, along with a huge tax break and an interest-free forgivable loan. Candy and the Democrats tilted at windmills, trying to change the way the public comment works. The ACLU slapped them down twice. Candy and the Democrats completely packed the boards and commissions, chiefly because George Clausen wanted a new shed for his snowblower, and the existing boards said that that was not allowed under the regulations. George didn't like that answer, so we just changed the members. And finally, what have the incumbents done? They engineered a massive increase in our water and sewer rates. The simple fact of the matter is that the Democrats, despite a supermajority position on the Board of Selectmen, have done nothing. The few things that they have tried have either failed completely or done irreparable damage to the town. D stands for do nothing. And finally, D stands for deceit and defiance. Candy told us, when she crafted her budget just 6 months ago, that the schools would be fully funded. You voted to fully fund the schools. And yet Candy ignored both your budget and her promise. She crafted a plan, a cash flow plan, that required the schools to close, that did not provide enough cash to keep the schools open through December and January. And she tried to hide it, ladies and gentlemen. She tried to cover it up. Even as it was obvious that that plan was falling apart, she refused to accept that there was really a problem. And now we, the town, we face a 10-4B investigation by the state of Connecticut into 2 years of hidden, covered-up Democratic underfunding of the schools. Both years of this administration are being investigated, and we face up to $6 million in potential fines. Remember that we have been told for the last 4 years that these fines are inevitable, that if you underfund the MBR, you will absolutely, definitively be fined 2 for 1. Mayor Welcome has informed us that 100 times over. Well, the Democrats underfunded the MBR for the last 2 years. They try to hide it, they try to lie about it, they try to cover it up, but that's what they did. D stands for deceit. So come the debate, what do we want to hear these candidates actually say? Assuming the Democrats show up, what do we want them to say? What do we want the Republicans to say? What do we want the independents to say? We want a clear commitment, ladies and gentlemen, to 5 very simple things. We need to fix the deficit. We have to accept that we cannot run this town with millions and millions and millions of dollars in unpaid bills. Being a deadbeat doesn't work. We have to fix the deficit, and that's going to have to come through taxation. There isn't enough money to cut, and it can't be cut fast enough to do it solely on the cost side of the equation. We have to fix the deficit. It has to come in the way of a supplemental tax. Secondly, we need a commitment to fix the fund balance. We have to have a fund balance. We have to be able to deal with the issues of mismatches in timing between the rate at which money comes in and the rate at which we have to spend money. We have to have a bank account, a savings account, so that we can deal with contingencies. We have to be creditworthy. We have to know that we can go out and borrow if we need to. Thirdly, we need to fix the costs, wastes, and inefficiencies in our government. If we continue to spend more than we bring in, it doesn't really matter how much of a supplemental tax we do. We will run out of money eventually. We need to re-engineer the way we do business here in town. We need to re-engineer the way we do services here in town. We need to re-engineer the way we do costs here in town. Individuals will undoubtedly suffer through this process, but the community needs to do this. We need to commit to fix the roads. Roads are not an optional kind of thing, ladies and gentlemen. Just as we can't get rid of teachers and we can't get rid of policemen, we can't get rid of the roads either. Government has to fix the roads. And if that means it can't do other things like give money to the chore service, so be it. If that means it can't do other things like give gold-plated benefit plans to various members of staff, so be it. Government must fix the roads. There is no choice. There is no option. Finally, we need to fix downtown. For 2 years, Candy has led a war on downtown. She has saddled it with extra taxes. She has saddled it with massive increases in water and sewer. She has chased away businesses. We need to fix downtown. We need to invest in our grand list. We do not need to invest in a shrubbery on Main Street. We need to invest in bringing residents into town and in bringing businesses into town. We need a clear commitment to fix fiscal responsibility and fiscal predictability. We need to know what our taxes are going to be going forward. We need fully transparent regulations. We need a government that is going to be a partner to downtown developers, not a competitor like Mike Renzullo, and not a hostile antagonist who's willing to say simply no. We need a government that was willing to partner with people who are going to invest money in fixing our downtown. We need to revisit the idea of the downtown incentive system. The idea that we should be taking multifamily housing and bringing it back into single owner-occupied housing. We need to be transparent and helpful and business-friendly. And we need to be all talking from the same hymn book. We, Winstead, need to fix downtown. And to do that, we need to fix our government, ladies and gentlemen. Our government will not fix downtown. Our government will not fix our roads. Our government will not fix the cost of its services. Our government will not fix its fund balance, and our government will not fix its deficit if we elect the same people that we currently have. We learnt that last night. Candy, George, and Michael voted no to the supplemental tax to pay our bills. They will vote no to the supplemental tax to pay our bills in April when we run out of money again. They are not interested in fixing our problem. If we want to fix our problem, to fix our financial problems, to reverse the collapse in our downtown property values, to rejuvenate our Main Street, to make our schools proud, we need new people in government. When you go to the voting booth in a couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen, vote no to the incumbents. Their record speaks too loudly for them. Vote no to the Democrats. They have shown their true colors. They are not interested in fixing our problems. And vote no to the Charter Revision proposal, which would gut the powers of the Water and Sewer Commission and allow the Board of Selectmen unilateral right to hike our water and sewer rates. They have already shown us that given that right, they will do so repeatedly and forever. If you want different government, elect different people. Vote no to the incumbents, no to the Democrats, no to the Charter Revision proposal. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts, and we have just a couple of weeks to go until the election. Thank you, and good night.